Someone on the microphone. You can still hear the microphone. Talk into it.
Just in case the mic doesn't work, if you like stand right here and talk, will they be able to hear us?
Yes.
Yeah.
If you've got no mask,
All right.
not with your mask on.
I mean, we're fully vaccinated. So.
Well, you can take your mask off to talk. They did at the French Open.
Check 1, 2. 1, 2, 3.
We're just getting set up. I hope you can hear us. I think you can. That's what they're seeing. It's live. Oh, so they're
Good morning. We are really pleased to be able to present this robot, WA Robotics Club. So why don't we give them a round of applause and I'll have them introduce themselves.
Sorry. Everyone hear me? Yes. Perfect. Okay. So we are the robotics team, as you can see on our shirts, our uniforms. And I'm going to begin with by telling you a little more about ourselves. So we are made up of 9th and 12th graders from our Western County, so the high school. And so we participate in a challenge called FTC, which stands for First Tech Challenge. And so our club is made out of people in our school who want to join. And usually we have about 20 people or more. But this year, because of the situation in the pandemic, we have around 12 people, 10 people. And so FTC, wait, does anyone remember what FTC stands for? Perfect. First Tech Challenge, which is exactly what it is. And so every year, they give us a new challenge to build a robot that can do certain goals or certain requirements. So stay within the field, or sometimes we have build a block or put a yoga ball somewhere. So every year, we bring our robot to compete in against other teams, like ours across Westford, across Massachusetts, and across the world. Okay. So we compete all over the country, and the team's similar goals. Similar requirements. I'm going to pass it to Thea.
All right, hi guys. I'm Thea. I'm a programmer on our team, and so I'm going to talk to you a little about this year's challenge. So as Sean said, this competition happens all over the country, and we compete typically within the state of Massachusetts. And so this year, the challenge is to launch rings. It's called Ultimate Goal. And so basically, the two parts of this challenge is to pick up rings and launch them at the little red rings and try to knock them over and to get them into the target. And then we have these things, we call them wobble balls, and we have to pick them up and put them down in different places. And so each competition, every year, the competition has two parts. It has the autonomous period and it has the driver control period, which is so the two parts, the first part is autonomous, and that's the part I personally work on most of the time. And that's when the robot has to make decisions on its own. So this is when you start coding the robot, and have any of you ever used Scratch before? Alright, so that's a drag and drop programming thing that you can use, right? You guys have probably made games or little movies on it, right? I remember when I was married, I would do that all the time. And so when you use languages like that, you can use drag and drop, or you can use what we do, which is the language Java. There's other languages like Python, C, Basic, there's all sorts of different languages you can use. And you basically just instruct the robot what to do. You tell it to pick up this wobble, you tell it to launch the ring. And we have to write that code in order to do that. And in the autonomous period, that's when we write code, and then you take our hands off the robot, and it does everything that you could hold it to, while making decisions on its own. So in this case, on this little white dot right here, there will be 4, 1, and 0 rings. And when it sees, you might not be able to see that dot. It's just a piece of paper. But basically, once you start the autonomous program, it will look at that spot and say, how many rings are there? And in this case, we have 0 rings. But if it sees 4 rings, it'll pick up this wobble and go over here. If it sees one wobble ball, or if it sees one ring, it will put the wobble ball over here. And if it sees 0, it will put it over here. And so that's the decision it has to make on its own. And then after that, it has 3 rings loaded into its launcher. And it will launch rings at this target to try to see if it can hit them and get points. All right, and so that's the autonomous program. It's a 30-second long period, and you can score as many points as you can during that time. And then we have all right, and so this next part of the challenge is the driver control period. And this is where we get to actually tell the robot what to do using these controllers. And they're pretty much Xbox controllers if any of you ever used them. And so there's 2 controllers, and you pretty much just tell the robot what to do. You tell it to right forward, right back, and you pick up rings that are dropped onto the field, and you try to look at the targets. And you have 2 minutes to do this. And our team typically, our highest scores are around 200, 220, I believe is our highest at one point, and our average is around 150. And then, but because there's so many teams in FTC, the scores can range from 6 points a match to 500. And so there's all different ways to design a robot, all different levels that you can work on, all different things that you can do on the field. And so because of that, there's so many different teams that you can interact with and learn from. And it's a great opportunity to see, even if you think you're designing anything, you can see someone else who has a better design, who has a different design. It's really cool to watch these things. All right, so I'm going to go back to Sean, and he's going to talk about each part of the robot that we already have.
Okay, so I'm Sean again, and technical difficulties like this. But generally, there are 2 big roles. There's the engineer and the programmer. So if you think about it, the engineer has to build the robot, and the programmer is like the brains of the operation, the brains of the robot, and can control where it moves and some small things like that, but it's a really big role. So if you think about it like a person, engineer kind of designs the body, while the programmer is the brain. So even though the brain is very important. So I'm the head engineer, and this means that I get to explain the fun part. What I think is fun, which is so I'm going to point to a few things if you want to stand up. You want to stand up and see some things. He also is going to show the example. So the first thing I'm going to show is the wheels. So the wheels are what I think is the coolest part, as it can go forward, backwards, sideways, like a normal car can, but it can also go side to side. So there is no wheel, which is the coolest part. We had that on the old design, but with these wheels, when one wheel spins forward, another wheel next to it spins the other way. So it goes back and forth and will allow it to go side to side with just 4 wheels. And so now another system is to hold the rings in from the ground as we get to throw them across the field. And we show an example. So we run over the wheels using the rings, using wheels, and pick up using a kind of suction, kind of like internal wheels spinning so that the friction kind of spins it and sucks it in. And so hopefully there's like 2 sets of rings that can kind of help with this process. So our storage is around 3 rings at one time. Usually when we run out, we go and pick up more, but we can hold 3 at one time. And now we can show the launching kind of aspect in which 2 wheels here spin the opposite direction so that it can push the wheels out, rings out. And one of the important things is this is a power shot and we try to knock it over. So these go back and forth and hit them and knock them over. And another thing is we want to launch it into this goal, and we get certain points for doing this. And you can show the launching spec. Sometimes our robot doesn't always work perfectly. It's sort of moody. If the ground isn't perfect, the lighting conditions for sensors or even small things can all affect if it, even the battery level, tiny little thing can affect if it hits it. So that's a big thing. There's also smaller things. As you see, there's a claw here, a sort of accessory that you can show. Moves up and down, and it can pick up these mushroom things, the wobble balls, and to pick it up and place it in a specific location. Just a note, both me and the main drivers had a test, so please bear with us. We're trying our best. So during autonomous, we use sensors, and there's a phone here that can detect certain objects like the wall, the rings, the wobble balls, and these small eyes, sort of, the senses, help the robot detect where it is without using. So this is completely hands-off area. I'm gonna try speaking like this. I know it might be a little hard to hear. It might be a little hard to hear, but bear with us. So during autonomous, we don't use our controllers. It's all pre-programmed, all already made beforehand. But the cool thing is that we program this using phones. And these phones, we don't have to directly connect wires to the robot. And it wirelessly Bluetooth sends the information from the controller through the robot. Okay, so now, summarize everything. This is all the functions and structures of the robot. But now, in order to build these things, we use something called the design process. And I'm gonna send some to Mahika, who will ask questions on this.
Right, so as before we make the robot, we have to do the design process. Does anyone know any of the steps of the design process? No? Okay. So the design process is made up of 5 steps. So there's first identifying the problem, brainstorming, designing, testing, and improving. So our first step is to identify the problem. So our problem right now is to launch the rings inside of the gulls. So once we figure that out, we go to the next step, which is solving the problem. So how we solved this was we found out different ways where we could launch it to these gulls. A couple of ways we thought of this was shooting it as a baseball, a slingshot, and a frisbee. When we tried baseball and the slingshot, it didn't really work. But the best way we could launch it was with a frisbee, like a frisbee. So, for example.
So specifically for the launching aspect, do any of you guys have how you guys would launch the sorry. Do you guys have any idea how to launch the rings out? No wrong answer.
Use like a spin, the thing that spins to launch it out.
Okay, so he said we could use a spinning, like a wheel.
Yeah,
Like a wheel. So that's exactly what we did, which is really good. That what we thought was the quickest way, but there's plenty of other. There's no wrong answer. So he said is using something to propel, and that's also a really good idea. It's part of our design, and Oh, so you said slingshot, and I like that point because that's actually what we thought of initially, and we tried designs that were able to launch it in a sort of crossbow kind of bow kind of thing. Anyone else? So you said pressurized air, which is a really good idea. And I think that's a pretty good idea, except, we also have to think about cost concerns, and that actually might be the best way. There might be a lot of really good ideas, but, we are kind of limited by how much money we get and what we have on hand. So even though there might be even faster ways, like all you guys, we're not, we're humans, and sometimes we have to make only one way, and that's what the challenge with having a whole team is, because everybody on the team has their idea of how they want to build a robot, and having to balance this with what we can actually do is a big part of the robotics team. So I'm going to pass it back to Mahika.
Okay, so the next step is to design the robot. So when we're brainstorming, we have to figure out a way how to put things together so that we can reach our goal. So we do this by making a prototype. And usually the prototype's made out of wood, and it's much more smaller than what we have right now. So, and we also use a software called CAD, which we could use to visualize and make sure every aspect of the robot works. So once we're done with that, so once we figure out a design that works, we usually test it to see if it works. And if there's any like complications, we can try to figure out different ways to how we can improve it. So for example, if like the launcher isn't working, then we can figure out a way like different angles, different speeds, so that we can launch in order to reach our goals. The last, and then now I'll pass it back to Sean.
So the whole beauty of this process is the engineer and programmer get to work together to create a cohesive, robot. The engineers, build things, and the programmers get to adjust speeds and maybe make motors turn this way, that way, at different speeds, while the engineers gets to change the angles and get to build the physical part. Both these work together and create one thing. So if we wanted to shoot the robot, watch the balls, watch the rings, which you guys are going to see later, if it doesn't go perfectly in, we can adjust small things so that, it does fit this. And, sometimes when we're doing a prototype and we try one design, like a slingshot, or, having multiple wheels in different angles, they don't always work out. And so we brainstorm either changing the idea or just adjusting what we currently have so it currently works. So I'm going to pass it to Thea.
All right, so unfortunately, we can't run the robot just yet because due to the presentation before us, the phones got really low on charge and they need to have power in order to run. So I'm just going to charge the phones for a little bit and then we'll be back and then we will actually run the robot. But I'm going to talk to you a little bit about how you can just think about how a robot works. And so I'm going to need a couple volunteers for this. All right, blue sweatshirt, bandana, and pink shirt there? Yes. All right. So I'm going to need one of you to pretend to be a robot. Or actually no, let's just have the three of you are going to have to work together. And you're going to have to tell me what to do. I'm going to pretend to be the robot. You need to tell me to walk around this box. So the thing about a robot is that it doesn't think human. If you tell a human to walk in a circle, it can walk in a circle. But if you tell a robot to walk in a circle, it won't know how to do that. You'll have to tell it to walk forward, stop, turn right, things like that. So you're going to have to tell me exactly what to do. So you guys can just work together and try to do that. Or I can give you different commands if you want, but I'm going to be the robot, so just try your best. So, go ahead. Don't want to crash into that, but if I was a robot, I would. And that's something that happens many times with us. We forget to tell our robot to stop, into the wall it goes. And then that's where I started. Okay, great job, guys. That was amazing. All right, so that might seem a little silly, but that is exactly how we program our robot. We tell it, okay, go forward for 3 seconds and then stop. Turn right for 2 seconds and then stop. Because otherwise, it's going to keep spinning. You have a question? Yeah, so you could do that, and that's definitely something they could have told me to do. But the thing about robots is that it doesn't know what 45 degrees is. You either have to tell it what 45 degrees is, or you have to use a specific tool. And so what we did is we used a tool that's inside a robot called a gyro, and it basically tells us the position of the robot when it's turning. So we'd say turn, it's not in degrees, it's in ticks. So we'd be like, okay, turn, or actually was it degrees? Wasn't degrees. There's many different units that you use that aren't the typical degrees and angles and things like that. And so you'd say, okay, turn from 70 degrees to 10 degrees. And it would have to slowly turn. But sometimes it misses 70 degrees, it misses 10 degrees. And then it goes, okay, well I missed 10 degrees and they told me to turn left. So I'm just gonna do it again. And they keep on going. And then they miss 10 degrees again. It's trying to get that exact number. And it just keeps on going in a circle until it finally hits it right in the spot. And so there's so many things that you have to take into account when you're programming a robot, and that's just one of them. And you guys really got a hang of how to instruct me to walk around this really quickly. So you understood that you have to tell me to stop, otherwise I'm just gonna keep on spinning forever. And that's a really good skill to have if you're going to try to programming or for Scratch, for Java, for robots, for literally anything. And so that's just a really good skill to have. I'm going to hand it to Sean. He knows about that.
So now I want to quickly talk about FLL, which is, you know how our challenge is FTC, First Tech Challenge. Can anyone guess what FLL stands for? It's a little hard. You can guess letters too. What does the F mean? First, perfect. Now, I know this is a little hard. Learning? Oh, close. But it's Lego League. So this is very similar to the FTC, and it's a level below. You guys get to use, if you guys want to join, it's with Legos, and you get to do the same cool stuff, and you compete against other people with Lego creations, move, and you guys have heard, I think it was called Mindstorm? Storm Gear, sorry. It's been a while. And you get to use cool Legos to do the same things, and you guys use the same process as us. Yes. Yeah. So it's for the ages of 9 to 15. And if you want, you can go the league above that. It's FTC. And there's even a league above this, which gets to create even bigger robots and cooler parts. So this is just, this is even all of the cool stuff. Yes. Oh, so I think you're talking about like the robot fight, what it was called, but those things are, when they create those robots, they actually use the same process. They want to create a robot that can flip the other robot or, push them, and they use the same process. They decide, that's why you see many different iterations, meaning different like accessories, different pushers, different spinners, and they all decide that that's the quickest and best way to get the other robot to lose. Yes. BattleBots, yes, thank you. So I'm going to talk a little bit about autonomous, which is, if you remember, this is the completely hands-off part. So I want to show you guys a little demonstration of autonomous. So this is all pre-programmed. They spend countless hours, I'll stand up and watch our robot. So we get a certain amount of points, and our goal in autonomous is to have the robot place the wobble goals, which is the mushrooms, in a specific place in the square, and launch some rings so it hits these power shots and into the high goal, which is just a goal. And then after the time is nearly up, we want to park on the white line like a normal car. So the fun part is we get to have a time constraint. Because it's the same field, we get to, even during the competition, we hope that our hands-off, I guess, time works exactly the same way that we did at home or, in our classrooms. But sometimes, we don't always get what we want. Sometimes there's a little change. Maybe the line is just a little bit too forward, and we have to adjust it in the competition. So we have to account for all things. Yes, question? So we said that our claw, which was the arm sort of thing, has to stay very still, and that's a very good point. That's why we have anchors, sort of things that keep the arm still, so that the base of it stays still, but the part can go forward and backwards. And we can show it right now. Just remember, this is completely hands-off, and we'll see how many points we score in the end. Ooh. Ooh, so we got a point there, which is really good. So although it wasn't perfect, it's still trying its best.
All right, so as you can see, a couple things went wrong there, and this is just part of the design process of, okay, what went wrong, let's figure that out, and then improve on it. So in this case, it missed the second wobble goal, and typically what happens is it moves right, but it was too far right, so when it tried to correct, it went too far left, and then missed. So that's something we'd go into the code, we'd look, and we'd say, okay, how can we change these numbers so it doesn't move too far left? And then when it went to go shoot the rings, they got jammed. And so only one ring was launched. And so that's another thing that we can think about, and we can say, okay, how can we fix this? So we look at the launcher and we'd say, okay, this screw has come loose. And so because of that, the rings aren't falling into the right place. And that's another way how we improve on the robot and work. All right, so now we're gonna run a full match, and we're just gonna show you how, oh, we have a question, yes. All right, so the question is, what is this clear thing right here? All right, so we call this the Great Wall. And, what the Great Wall is it's basically just a wall that when rings are put onto the field, so when rings are put onto the field, we use this little feeder thing right here, and they roll, and they roll. And you can see how it went all the way to the back of the field. So during the game, we're typically have the robot right here launching rings. And then when we want to go get more rings, we have to wait for the rings to get on the field. And when, in the first few competitions, what would happen is the rings would roll past us. And we'd either have to go get them, or we'd have to park our robot here and wait for someone to feed the rings in. And that took a lot of time. And so because of that, it was about 3 days before state competition, we decided we need a wall. And so, as you can see, most of our robot is pretty well put together. You see the metal and the 3D printed plastic parts, but this is just plastic. This is just plexiglass. It's just normal plastic, not cut very well. And the reason for that is we just grabbed what we saw we were building out of our captain's basement. So we just found what we had, and we said, okay, let's make a wall. And it works pretty well. And so typically the robot's on the other side, but if Mika drops a ring down, it gets stuck. And so that's one of the things where we said, okay, what's the problem? The problem is the rings are rolling past us. All right, brainstorm solution. We need a wall. Design the wall. You can actually see this is a 2-part wall. Originally, it was only half width. this little part at the top wasn't there. And so when we originally designed it, we just came up with half of that. And then when we tested it, we found it was too short. So we improved on it and added another section to it. And that's just, again, the design process. We went through that to create the wall that allowed us to score like 50 more points in a match. You have a question?
Yeah, does the wall go down every time that it's big? Does it go down every time that after it shoots the
Yeah, so the question is, does the wall go down every time it shoots? And the question is yes. So what we would do is typically the robot, if I can position it, typically the robot is around here when it's launching. And so because of that, while it's launching rings, this is why we have two drivers, so they can do multiple things at once. Well, one person is controlling the launching and is launching the rings into the target. The other person lowers the wall, and that's when the rings start to get put down. And as you can see, it stops it. And so by the time we've got finished launching the rings, the wall has already blocked 3 rings for us to pick up really easily. So the wall goes down every time you launch rings, and then, because it's kind of hard to drive with something sticking out, we just put it back up. And it worked really well for us. All right, so does anyone else have a question before we run a full match?
is it like a competition and like there's positions like first and second?
Yes. Yeah, so there are positions. Oh, sorry. The question was, is it a competition like positions like first, second, and third? And the answer to that is yes, there are. And so it's not, this year was weird because of the pandemic. And normally when you have a competition, the field is a 6x6. This is a 4x6 instead. And there's 4 robots on the field at once. And so you'll have about 30 teams at a competition, and we all meet in a school gymnasium typically. And we just team up with one other team, and we compete together. And when that happens, you do 5 different matches. And the teams with the most wins and the most points then go to the finals. And after that, they compete, and then you have a first, second, third, and fourth place team. And then they also have awards that you can win. You can win awards for reaching out to your community, for having a really cool design that no one else had. You can have a design, even if your robot doesn't work too well, if you have something about your team that's just plain inspiring, if you only had a budget of $100 and you still were able to build a robot that is able to launch 5 rings, that's pretty impressive, that's pretty inspiring. And so with that, you can win the Inspire Award. And using both placing on, did you get first, second, third, fourth, or if you get an award, you can move on to the next level of competition. And so for us, in, what month was it? February, we held our qualifier. And while it was different because it was only one robot on the field and everything was remote, we still held the competition and we came in 6th in our qualifier out of 30 teams. And so because of that, the top 8 teams were allowed to go to states. So we went to states in May 15th, I believe it was, so about a month ago. And we did pretty well. We've gone to states 4 to 5 years. And so we typically come in around 15th out of the 30 teams to go. So Massachusetts also, because we compete in Massachusetts, because we're in Western, has typically the winning team every year. The winning team, not just of states, but of worlds. So if any of you probably haven't heard of them, but there's a team called Brainstormers. They are from Western. They compete in FTC just like us. They have won worlds, and they go to worlds almost every year. There's a team called Pioneers from St. Joseph's Academy, and they formed a team 3 years ago, and they have won worlds, and they go to worlds almost every year. And it's pretty cool to be able to talk to these people who have gone to the next level and know what it's like, who are right here within the area, within our town. And so there's lots of opportunities to be able to meet people in FTC, and it's a really cool thing that you can do. All right, I've talked for a while. Let's run the full match. we can see how it goes.
If you guys want to pay attention to the launching aspect, it's all pretty cool. You can see how the wheels move. You can see how even tiny things. Not always perfect, but you know, we're trying our best.
Does anyone have any questions? Yes. The wheels, yeah. So there are different points. So this right here is 12 points. So if we shoot here, we get 12 points. And for these power shots, we get 15. And if we pick up the wobble ball too, we'll get 15 too. Yes?
How much time do you have in a lab?
Usually it's 2 minutes. Yeah, 2 minutes for the driving. Yes? Oh, 7 months. No.
Even though we try, it cannot be done overnight.
Yes. There have been times where we decided, we're redesigning this robot, and I believe it was my freshman year, we decided to redesign our complete robot from scratch 1 week before state competition. And that was an experience, and it was like 12 hours working in our captain's basement every day of, I think it was February break. We just spent the entire break in that basement, and we built a pretty darn good robot. We came in like 13th, I think. So it worked. Yes, in the orange shirt.
So, do you use iPhones because it was not just iPhones, but phones, because it was a good portable way to connect Bluetooth and to basically kind of like a small portable, not heavy device?
Yes.
Can you repeat
we
the
use
question?
Android Studios. So do you want to?
So first of all, he asked why we use our phones.
Give him
So why do we use phones? FTC has a certain rules on how you can connect your robot. For one, they have a rule where like you can't have anything living on your robot. You can't put your cat on your robot. You can't make your robot a cat under a box. Things like that. You can't have a human hiding in your robot to do the things for you. And one of the rules is you have to connect using phones. And so that's what we do. And it works pretty well. As you can see, sometimes things go wrong, which is why you see us like trying to fiddle with things. In one case, we were like, the controllers aren't connecting. I wonder why. Look with the wires a bit. And then you realize you didn't plug in the wire at all, and that's why it's not working. So it's things like that.
So right now we're just setting up autonomous. This is the hands-off process. And so we're going to start a full match. You can see what we do in a competition.
Alright, so as you can see, it kind of did the same thing again. It got a little stuck. It seems that our mover that pushes the rings down is a little bent, so that is probably why the rings aren't coming out too well. But we're not gonna fix it for this, but we can just like work with it and fiddle with it, and it'll eventually just work itself out. All right, so now we're gonna move on to the driver control period, and because we only have, actually, do we want to get a volunteer for this? We have right here? Yep. All right, so I need you to come here and see this. Basically, what you're gonna do is just wrap rings down here when we ask you to, okay? It's pretty simple. All right. All right, it's gonna be 2 minutes long, so let's just see what happens. Right. All right. Ready, set, go. All right. Can you drop some rings? Oh, there we go. Got it. Oh, that's perfect. Wait, can you drop some rings?
So as you see, our robot is having some technical difficulties, but even during competitions, our robot doesn't always function perfectly. I remember a couple years ago, we had to like suck something like blocks in. He actually did a really good job, but sometimes parts break, and we have to fix them after the match, and he adapted pretty well in a bad situation. So now, end game part, shoot into the power shots, and hopefully, if we knock all three down, we get even more points, and we finally park on the white line and pick up some wall bubbles. So this is the final part of the challenge. There's 3 phases: autonomous, which is hands off; the driver phase, like I guess the first part, and then the last 30 seconds, which is end game, is just finishing up what we need to do, as you see what the is doing. Good job.
So, you saw those technical difficulties. The ring mover is a little bent, and so it's not pushing the rings completely correctly. And that's why I'm having a bit of difficulty launching. There's also the fact that me and Sean are not the drivers of our robot. We have assigned roles in our team, and we have 2 kids who unfortunately both had tests today, so they couldn't come. But we were assigned to drive the robot instead of them. And you can see we need some practice. But I mean, you can hit power shots, so I'd say that was pretty good. So as you can see, there's the power shots, which would, and then there's high goal, low goal, middle goal, and moving the wobble rolls. And so we got the power shot, which was great. That gets you 15 points per power shot, so that would be 45. And then autonomous didn't work as planned, but it would have gotten us 20 points. 20 points? 32 points. I can do 32 points, okay. All right, so does anyone have any questions?
Before we do anything, can we give a round of applause for volunteers?
All right, you had a question? How did you get it to move sideways? All right, that's a great question. So when we designed this robot, we used Macman wheels, and they look like normal wheels from first glance. But if you move them in different ways, you move one backwards and the other one forwards, which you would think would just cause the robot to move weirdly, it actually allows the robot to move sideways. And so that's a really great addition that we got to the robot maybe 2 years ago. And before that, when we wanted our robot to move sideways, we would have to add a wheel to the center of the robot that was sideways and use that. And that was not great because it took up a lot of space. And as you can see, our robot uses pretty much every part of the space we have. So having these mechanisms is really handy.
Is there a max amount of how many rings there can be at one time?
Yeah, so the question was, is that the max amount of rings that you can have at a time? Yes, FTC put a limit on how many rings you could hold at once, and the limit was 3 rings. So that's how we built our robot. You have a question?
Are there any materials that we can't use?
Like,
Question, repeat.
all right, so the question was, are there materials you can't use? Again, I think living things are a no-go. Radioactive things are a no-go. These might seem obvious, but FTC gives out a list every year of stuff you cannot use, and they make sure to put those on the list just in case someone decides to put a monkey on their robot. So, you know, most of the time we build a robot out of the same materials every year. Some people are a little shocked by this, but we have to take apart this robot every year and reuse the pieces. And it's kind of sad because we put 7 months of work into it, but it's also really interesting because you get to take it apart and it helps new members figure out how to build a robot. And so, because we use the same parts every year, we don't really need to pay attention to the materials we don't use because we know we can use these materials. But I'm sure there's some things that we aren't allowed to use. There's some batteries we probably aren't allowed to use for safety purposes that might not be able to handle it. Things like that. Question?
Is there one chip that holds like all the code at all time now, so like when you code in it, when you're detaching everything from the robot?
All right, the question was, is there a chip that you put the code on that you have to like rewrite every time that you detach stuff from the robot? And the answer to that, I actually really love that question, is the code is all on that phone right there. And so the phones communicate to each other, and when I download it on one phone, basically there's an FTC app that they give us, and they give us the code for that. And you basically just write an itty-bitty part of the code that's on that app, and you rewrite it, and you make all the changes, and every time you want to make a change to the code, you re-download the app with the new code that you wrote. And so it's, as the programmer, when you're working on the autonomous program and we're programming it to move forward, stop, oh no, it went too far, and you have to rewrite the code, it is a bit tedious to have to sit there and wait for the code to load, but it's just part of the process, and you get used to it, and it's not that too bad.
So I know you guys have a lot of questions, but we are going to the exciting part. We're going to have 4 people come and try launching some rings. So all the volunteers. The bandana, green shirt, and you two. Oh. Oh.
All right. So I'm just gonna.
So I'll be asking questions, and you can also watch along to see, you know, how your classmates do in launching 2 rings. Cool. Yes. So if you guys have any questions, I'm down to answer them. Yeah. Oh, Oh, you guys can come a little closer if you want to see, stand up. Ask me questions. Yes. Parts. So she asked where we can get the parts for the robot. We mainly reuse a lot of parts, but sometimes the parts get a little old. They break down, so we buy them from like a website that FTC approves. You get a lot of them. They're pretty expensive, so we try not to buy new parts, but occasionally we'll have to. Any more questions? Any more questions? Out of our team? So Thea wants to do computer science for college. Basically, continue her passion for programming. I like being an engineer, but I also like biology. You can join this team even if you don't want to be an engineer or don't necessarily want to program the rest of your life. Because even though I like science and biology, it doesn't necessarily translate directly with robots. But I think even just having this as a hobby or side thing is great, and really fun with my friends. And yeah, yes. What? Oh, so she asked what our budget for a robot is, and normally with fundraising we get a few $1,000s, usually 1 to 2. We have reserves, so for the previous year we can either use all that money, and the next year might not have as much money, which we kind of did this year. We upgraded a lot of our parts, but next year might have to reuse the same parts. Yes. So she asked if it's difficult designing a robot with the same parts, and truthfully, most of the parts we can kind of reuse, like the base, the wheels, a lot of the code we can reuse. Like driving, I think that stayed the same for a long time. But for the launcher, 1 year we might have to pick up different blocks, like foam blocks instead of rings. And we have to completely redesign that, and that's the difficulty of this. We might not even be able to use the green wheels, but we have a lot of parts. We have a kind of not really warehouse, like a storage closet of a bunch of old parts that we can use. Yeah, and sometimes we have some issues with our robot crashing through walls. That's why we have the walls to protect everybody. Oh, that's a really good question. So we do name our robots. So it's really hard to see here, but our robot is called Larry. This weight is called Larry. Yeah, I confuse you. I mean, it is a piece of metal. Does anyone know Mary Poppins? So, we put the wobble gold on top. It looks like an umbrella, like Mary Poppins, and we called it Mary. Previous years, we called it Cat. Honestly, we just name it whatever. Sometimes there's mainly a story behind it, a complicated story. But yeah, I think we have different parts of the robots called different things. Battery, we have one named Chad, Brad, Samosa. Like, we have some weird names. Oh, so we asked if we could make the exact same robot, and we could if we can somehow figure how it could fit around the challenge. So we don't know what next year's challenge would be, but I think FTC tries to make it different. But hypothetically, if your design is just so good that you can kind of change it a little bit, we could do that. That's possible. Usually, though, they give us different. You see our little goalposts. That's given us for this year. And then next year they're going to give us a completely new set of something different. So, it's possible. You're going to get attached to it. Might be able to keep a few things. Yes.
Are there different goals for each year?
Oh, yes. So he asked if there are different goals each year. So that's a really good question. That's exactly what they do. They have new challenges every year. So this year specifically, we had some long trains, as you can see here. But last year, we picked up blocks and we did a completely different thing. They gave us like I think it was the theme of like space shuttle kind of thing. And we had to design a robot that like hooked on to like a piece in the middle. And, you know, we had to kind of use the same way of thinking, but, you know, kind of hard to come up with new ideas. That's a good question. I think we can be as creative as we want to be, unless it breaks some certain rules, like can't be too dangerous. If it shoots it like incredibly fast, that might be an issue. But I mean, as long as you're creative, you can come up with any idea. Yeah. Yep. Yeah, don't worry about it. I would also say a big part of our design is not only making it functional, but like we like to make it look nice. As you can see, the cable management, put a lot of zip ties, tape, make it look pretty, make it look functional, make it actually work, not get caught on anything. Yeah, that's also a big part of it near the end.
Yeah, it's gonna have an advantage.
Oh, yes.
With this Xbox usage.
Perfect. So these are really old Xbox controllers. You know,
They're a little different from an Xbox controller, but
it's the same premise. This is why we always have to be careful. So if you guys are ever considering making a robot, you guys can join the league below us, which is the FLL. It's for 8 to 15-year-olds. Basically create the same thing with Legos, probably a little safer, but it's still good. I want to thank all the volunteers. They did a very good job. You know, thank you.
thank you for listening to us, guys. This was really fun, and it's really wonderful to see so many people just interested in what we're doing and what we put our heart into. So, if you guys are ever interested in robotics, there's so many opportunities for you to do FLL or just coding. There's so many different things that you can create if you put your mind to it. So just thank you for listening and have a nice day.
Thank you guys.
Alright, fifth grade, Mrs. Moss's class, and if you line up behind Bradley, we're gonna go out this door for a quick thing.
Yep, so we're gonna go behind Riley.
Thank you, guys. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
I know. You guys didn't know about it?
No, well, we had an idea of we might do it. We were never given confirmation, and we were never told the times or really anything other than it might be this day.
Right.
And then when
And I had a confirmation.
Yeah.
It is this day, it's this time.
we didn't get
No,
the
it was
time
just
or
a-
anything.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was
It
not
wasn't
good.
your fault, yeah.
So, well, good. Thank you for making it
We'll
happen.
figure it out.
Because,
This is very,
Check, check,
very
check,
fun.
check, check, check. 1, 2. Okay. 2. Check. Check, check, check.
Part of the reason I think the antenna isn't here is because I'm trying to have you hold it up here because the antenna was here. But anyway, yeah, sometimes. But even still, this is, I'm not sure if it had any effect whatsoever. Oh well, but anyway, did you see, are you doing it again later today or not?
no, that's it for us.
That's it. Okay.
Oh, you're just coming back at one? No, I'm going to do that to you.
I mean, we could, but
Oh, Julie, do I need to end this? Do I need to end this? I don't have my glasses on.
End broadcast. So it's okay if I turn it on. Okay, end broadcast.